In the eastern sector of the Ukrainian front line, where a long belt of broken tree lines divides farmland from open steppe, the operational situation had shifted rapidly over the previous months. Russian mechanized units had attempted multiple pushes along narrow approach corridors, hoping to force Ukrainian defenders to redeploy their limited armored assets. This region, shaped by constant artillery fire and months of entrenchment, had become a maze of communication trenches, dugout firing positions, observation points, and concealed staging zones. Within this environment, the Azov unit, one of the most experienced and resilient Ukrainian formations, was tasked with halting a renewed Russian armored thrust reported to be forming southwest of the sector. Ukrainian reconnaissance drones operating from fortified rear positions had identified an unusual cluster of Russian vehicle movements along a dirt route previously considered too risky for sustained mechanized operations. Several armored vehicles, including main battle tanks supported by infantry fighting vehicles, were observed maneuvering behind a tree line approximately 6 to 8 kilometers from Ukrainian forward trenches. The intention behind this movement was initially unclear. Some analysts at the Ukrainian command post suspected a probing attack designed to test the stability of the defensive line, while others believed it was preparation for a larger coordinated action. What the Azov commanders understood, however, was that any armored advance in this terrain posed a significant threat if left unchecked. In response to this emerging pattern, the Azov unit repositioned several mobile anti-armor teams to areas where natural cover and elevation could offer an advantage. These teams consisted of small, highly trained groups equipped with a mix of anti-tank guided missiles, portable reconnaissance systems, and communication gear, allowing real-time coordination with drone operators. Their role was not simply to engage enemy armor, but to force Russian units into unfavorable positions, disrupt their planned routes, and reduce the tempo of the offensive before it could fully develop. Much of their work relied on precise timing and consistent communication with command posts and aerial assets. By late afternoon on the second day of observation, clear indicators showed that the Russian armor was beginning to concentrate near the front of the tree line. Dust signatures and thermal imagery confirmed multiple tanks idling in concealed positions. Ukrainian drone operators logged their positions, noting identifiable silhouettes that likely corresponded to T-72 and T-80 variants. Although Russian units had adapted some camouflage methods, these measures were insufficient against the persistent overhead surveillance maintained by Ukrainian operators. With increasing certainty that a mechanized push was imminent, the Azov unit received authorization to prepare an interception plan. The initial phase of the plan involved directing drone reconnaissance to monitor the Russian vehicles continuously, while Ukrainian artillery units recalibrated fire missions based on updated coordinates. Several strike options were prepared, ranging from preemptive artillery interdiction to targeted ambushes by anti-tank teams. The Azov command determined that attempting to destroy the entire formation before it moved would not be the most effective use of ammunition, especially given the dispersed positions of the Russian vehicles. Instead, they opted to engage the tanks once they committed to advancing across the open corridor, where concealment was minimal and movement predictable. Shortly after dawn the following morning, the first signs of active Russian movement were detected. Thermal drone footage revealed tank engines warming up and infantry dismounting in preparation for movement. The tanks began forming into a staggered line, advancing at a cautious but steady pace toward the open fields. Ukrainian forward observers tracked each vehicle's position, relaying information to Azov teams stationed at intervals along the defensive line. The terrain forced the Russian armor into a narrow funnel, making their movement more predictable but also concentrating their firepower. This was the moment the Azov teams had prepared for. As the first Russian tank crossed into the pre-designated engagement zone, an Azov anti-armor team located in a concealed trench complex prepared their missile launcher. Verified coordinates from drone operators ensured that the target was accurately identified. When the order was given, the team initiated the engagement, launching a guided missile that struck the tank's left frontal quadrant. The impact disabled the vehicle's mobility, forcing it to a halt and creating an obstacle for the tanks trailing behind it. Almost immediately, the Russian formation slowed, attempting to adjust their movement while communicating the presence of anti-tank activity to their command. This momentary disruption allowed a second Azov team positioned on a flank to strike another Russian tank, attempting to bypass the disabled vehicle. Drones recorded the missile's trajectory as it hit the side armor, igniting internal components and producing a thermal signature visible even through the morning haze. The loss of 2 tanks in rapid succession significantly altered the Russian formation's behavior. Instead of accelerating through the engagement corridor, they began to disperse and seek cover, actions that further exposed them to the overlapping fields of fire established by the Azov unit. Ukrainian artillery, which had been held in reserve during the initial engagements, now began striking pre-registered grid coordinates behind the Russian tanks. These strikes disrupted supporting infantry and prevented additional vehicles from reinforcing the frontline push. Under continuous aerial observation, Russian attempts to regroup were quickly detected and countered. Azov teams maintained communication discipline, requesting new firing vectors when Russian vehicles repositioned. The combination of guided missiles, artillery precision, and real-time drone feedback placed the Russian armor under persistent strain. By mid-morning, a third Russian tank attempted to withdraw to a more defensible section of the tree line. However, its movement was identified by an overhead drone, and its coordinates were transmitted to an Azov team equipped with a different type of anti-tank system. The team moved along a narrow trench corridor, emerging briefly to secure a firing angle before launching another guided missile. The strike hit the rear engine compartment, causing the vehicle to lose power and emit thick smoke. Drone footage later showed the crew abandoning the tank under fire from supporting Ukrainian infantry positions. The collapse of the armored push became increasingly evident as Russian units attempted to coordinate a defensive withdrawal. Several infantry fighting vehicles tried to provide covering fire while the remaining tanks reversed direction. Yet the terrain limitations and continuous monitoring from Ukrainian drones meant that every movement was observed almost immediately. Artillery strikes intensified, targeting clusters of Russian vehicles as they attempted to regroup. The Russian formation, which had initially intended to probe or breach the Ukrainian defensive line, found itself fragmented and vulnerable. Throughout the operation, Azov commanders emphasized coordination and restraint rather than rapid, unplanned firing. Each missile was used only when a high-value target was confirmed, avoiding wasteful engagements and ensuring sustained defensive capability over the coming days. This disciplined approach allowed the Azov unit to maintain effective control of the corridor while minimizing their own exposure. Forward observers reported no significant breaches in the defensive line, and the Russian advance was halted well short of its projected objectives. By late afternoon, reconnaissance drones confirmed that at least 3 Russian tanks were destroyed, 2 were immobilized, and several support vehicles were damaged or abandoned. The surviving Russian units retreated to their original positions behind the tree line. Ukrainian analysts concluded that the attempted push had been decisively disrupted. The success was attributed not to overwhelming firepower, but to coordination between reconnaissance elements, anti-armor teams, artillery units, and frontline infantry. In the aftermath, Azov personnel conducted controlled advances to secure parts of the battlefield. Engineers and explosive ordnance specialists inspected the destroyed vehicles to assess potential intelligence value, documenting damage patterns for analysis. Drone operators reviewed recorded footage to identify useful insights for future defensive planning. Each engagement added to the accumulated knowledge of how Russian armored units adapted their tactics and how Ukrainian defenders could respond efficiently. The broader significance of this engagement extended beyond the immediate defensive victory. It demonstrated the continued effectiveness of small, flexible Ukrainian units operating under decentralized command structures. It also reinforced the importance of integrating drones, anti-armor systems, and artillery into a cohesive operational framework. For frontline units like Azov, such engagements underscored the necessity of maintaining constant situational awareness, rapid decision-making, and reliable communication systems. While the battle did not shift the overall strategic situation overnight, it prevented a potential breakthrough and preserved Ukrainian control of a critical section of the Eastern Front. Commanders noted that even limited Russian armored pushes could lead to significant consequences if not countered promptly. The actions of the Azov unit ensured that this did not occur, maintaining stability within the sector and providing valuable time for broader Ukrainian defensive preparations. As the day ended and reconnaissance confirmed the absence of further Russian armored movements, the Azov unit returned to a heightened but steady operational posture. Their success in disabling multiple tanks under challenging conditions highlighted the capability of well-trained, well-coordinated infantry units to counter armored threats effectively. The battle served as another example of how modern warfare increasingly relies on the integration of technology, mobility, and tactical precision rather than massed formations alone. For more detailed frontline reports, historical military breakdowns, and high-quality battlefield analysis, follow and subscribe to Delta History to stay updated with our latest content.